Welcome to another episode of the Ask Mrs. HR podcast. Today we are at our season finale and we're going to just look over some things that we've done on the podcast, things we learned and things we can do better. And you're going to get to meet the man behind the podcast today. So before you forget, like, share, and subscribe, and welcome back to the Ask Mrs. HR podcast. Welcome back to the Ask Mrs. HR podcast. I hope that you liked, shared, and subscribed while I was gone. So, this has been an amazing season. This is our last episode. And me and the producer of the podcast, who I'm so grateful for, Mr. Octavius Johnson, is here with me. And we're going to just go over like everything. We're going to look at what we learned this season, what we would do differently. I don't know what we're going to talk about, a whole bunch of things. And maybe you'll learn a lot about Mr. Octavius, who's been behind the scenes and what he does for a living. So I'm definitely going to try to get him to share more with you. So welcome back. Hi, Mr. Octavius.
I'm doing fantastic. I really appreciate you having me.
Okay, I like how you talk into the mic like that.
Yeah, so I really
That's
appreciate.
not how you taught me to do it, though. So, yes, I'm so happy to have you. I actually need more men on this podcast.
Absolutely.
When I was looking at the podcast overall, did we have any men on the podcast?
There were absolutely zero.
Yes, so that's number one. We want this to be more diverse. We definitely want to have our black men represented. So I'm going to need you to call all your friends and tell them to be on the podcast, all your male friends.
You know what? It's funny though. Although that we only had females, the analytics show that there were more male viewership.
Now, why do you think that was? Is it because we were female?
Maybe.
I think that's why. I think we had some beautiful, powerful black women on the show.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
when the men saw it, they were like, stop. And they just stopped at that podcast. When we first started the podcast, I only had like people from the Ukraine and Russia watching. So what was that?
Maybe they just like black women.
Yeah, I think they just like black women. So, hey, Russia. Hey, Ukraine. Seriously, we hope all is well over there. And, the goal is that we would be international and
That is the goal.
That these topics are relative to everyone because we talk about careers, entrepreneurs, our lives. So how can we make sure, everybody sees it around the world? Mm-hmm. That's the goal. So, all right. Well, I heard you had some questions for me.
I just thought that this was a great opportunity to reflect and just go back and just pull out some things that resonated during this whole process. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
And I know when we first started, when I first brought this to you, I think I asked you about 3 or 4 times.
Maybe 5 or 6 or 7.
Yeah, and at first you didn't want to do it.
You asked me a whole lot of times, and I said no.
So
do the podcast. Yes.
What was the issue? Why were you hesitant at first to do the podcast?
I'm so glad you asked me that because I have so many people who keep asking me about the podcast now. They see the podcast. And honestly, I am an HR consultant. I do HR. I'm a professor. I'm a public policy advocate. I am a teacher. I'm everything but a podcast host. So that's how I felt. I felt like I didn't have time. I'm trying to build my human resources business. I consult with small businesses every day. Like that's my job. I am employed by me and I am working like 12 to 14 hours a day just trying to build Thelá Thatch Consulting, Mrs. HR in the box. I just wrote a book when you asked me, The Diversity Dilemma.
Right.
I was doing a book tour. And I'm like, well, how much more can I do? And now I'm adding another thing. And that has been, the challenge for me in general. Like I want 50,000 things, but sometimes personally, I don't want to add another thing. So with much, they say, with much,
It's
what's it? With
given,
much is given, much
much
is
is required.
expected, and
Yeah.
much is required. And sometimes I don't like that. I'm like, I want to just, I'm not even really an extroverted person. I'm an introvert. I'm very much like to be behind the scenes. When I started in television years and years ago, I was a production assistant. I was a field producer. I wrote scripts. I ran, I just want to be behind the scenes. I
Right.
guess that's the answer. And I didn't want to give up any more of my time, but to get one thing I've learned through this process, when I see the thousands of people, thousands of views, I don't know if the same people or whatever, but I look at the analytics and like people are stopping me at church, on the street, when I, go to different events and they see the podcast. Now, why y'all not subscribing to the podcast? Pause for dramatic effect. Um, I really appreciate if you subscribe going forward. As a matter of fact, you can subscribe anonymously. I saw there's a feature there. When you subscribe, you don't have to let people know who you are when you subscribe. But nevertheless, there's been at least 2 dozen people, maybe 20 something people who love the podcast, um, who's still watching it. They watched it twice. I
Right.
mean, so all that to say, was a long-winded answer to say it's clearly helping people, and I'm at a place in my life where it's about service.
Right.
The last podcast episode, and I know we're going to go over some episodes, the one with Dr. Carla Gray and Dr. EP, that really impacted me a lot in terms of your business and the things that you do and everything being about service. Now, I serve at church and pay my tithes and all that, but I think there was always this little bit of me that kept the business separate, and that was mine. And now it's mine to give as service. And so, me here talking, I think some people are kind of fascinated with how am I doing all these things, and I'm hoping that this podcast will help educate people and just empower people. Like, because if I could do it, trust me, tell them please. If I could do it, anybody could do it. Because I'm just sitting here like, what am I talking about today?
So episode now. So what
Yeah.
was it like? What was that one thing that
Mm-hmm. Mm,
resonated with you that
mm-hmm.
made an impact?
Yeah. Well, first, it was a few things. The first thing was it became very apparent by the ninth episode that almost everyone on the show in some way had a higher degree. They either had masters or they were just experts in their field. And I mean, I
Right.
want people who are experts in their field, and that's what I'm trying to bring to the audience so people can learn like how do such and such, how do you do these things. So that was the one thing, and they were both doctors, and I'm like, goodness, everybody on the show gonna be a doctor. So and I had just met Dr. Carla Gray. We went walking together, and I was just so impacted by how open she was to be on the show. Like I literally known her for an hour, and I said, "Oh, I'd love to have you on the podcast." And just the level, excuse me, the level of professionalism that she came. Like she spent the whole, not tell all her business, but this was important to me. She spent the whole day getting ready for the podcast. Like she was supposed to go running with us. She's like, "Oh no, I need to get ready for the
Right.
podcast." And that just showed me like things that I take for granted sometimes, like the podcast and what I do in general in life, that people take it seriously. And I just was just in awe at her level of respect for her craft and for what how she shows up. And I walked away saying I need to be better with respecting what I do, making time to be on time. I was late today, by the way, sorry. But making time to be on time and things like that. And, just that was very impactful. Just how they showed up. Just how they showed up. Like they were about the business.
Absolutely.
They were about the
It
business
was
when they
about the
showed
business.
up.
I enjoyed
And
them.
yeah, they were amazing. And then the other thing again about loving yourself.
Hmm.
When I walked away that whole week saying, I'm being selfish so I could be selfless.
Right.
That really stood out to me because I've already felt that way, but she put it so simple. Be selfish so you can be selfless. And I always used to say recently, especially these past 3 years, is no one gets from my cup. They get from the saucer.
Right.
So you have a cup, you have a teacup, and then you have the saucer. I'm like, you can have what's in the saucer,
Absolutely.
like that plate, because I need everything in the cup. So when I'm full, when my cup is full, And so she just made it even more simple.
For
Okay.
those who didn't see episode
That's a good idea.
9,
Yeah.
here's a clip of what's his name, Dr. Gray,
Dr. Carla
talking
Gray.
about self-love.
Yes.
Loving yourself has nothing to do with what you have, but who you are. As we work to look at self worth, it's actually what we give ourselves so far as qualities: patience, kindness, self compassion, respect, and self respect. So when we try to tie ourselves to all that exterior, then we actually are giving ourselves what we call conditions. Wow. So it's not even love.
The thing that self-love,
Yeah.
why that resonated with me being a person of the church.
Right.
I always hear Christians talk about the first two commandments: love the Lord with all your heart and all your,
Yeah, and all your soul.
on all
And
your
all
soul.
your
And the second commandment is to love your neighbor as
yourself.
yourself.
Yes.
Now, every time they
Yes.
they say that, now this is no criticism of the church, right? But every time they say that, it's almost like they just dismiss as yourself.
Right, right, right.
So that means that I can't love you before me. That's why that resonated
Right.
with me.
I like, yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense. And honestly, even if it didn't make sense to me, it's still good because that's your, that's your takeaway. And it's, part of listening to Dr. Carla and Dr. EP, it helped me to see I have my own journey that I can hear something 20 times and then it takes the 50th time to say, oh, that's what that meant. So most of my time I've been in the church, dedicated my life to God at 27.
Right.
And I'll just say, I'll be 55 this April. And long story short about that, I was taught deny yourself. So for almost 20 years, loving God meant denying myself. It
Okay.
meant if I wanted to do a podcast, that's selfish. If I want to write a book, well, that's selfish. If I want to do anything that's not related to the church or evangelism, that's selfish because God is first and Jesus denied himself.
Right.
And if I'm not denying myself, then I'm not being like Jesus. So it's a total flip to hear someone say and to practice, and it sounds easy, but it's not, especially as a Christian, because we think that we're a good Christian the more we deny ourselves
Right.
and the more we deny our worldly desires.
So for all of the viewers who happen to be Christians, please leave a comment explaining to us self-love. Is that wrong or is it right? Give us an explanation of what self-love means to you from a Christian perspective. Because for me, when I always apply that scripture, say love is patience, love is kind, love does not envy, love, all those things, right? And 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 I know we kind of going into something
No,
different,
go there.
but when I say love is patient,
Yes. Love.
how do you apply it to self-love? What does that mean in a self-love
I
sense?
love that example.
What does it mean to be patient with yourself?
That's right. Be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself. I say that all the time, but honestly, until this second, I never thought about it as the First Corinthians 13 scripture. Be kind. We always talk about love is patient, love is kind, love is gentle, is all of the different things that love is, but we don't apply. I'll say we, me. I don't
Right.
always. I never even thought about it right now. Applying all of those same principles that the Bible teaches to ourselves. And so you're absolutely right. I One of the hardest things as a business owner, and it's very powerful that you say that, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, one of my biggest challenges is being patient with myself as I'm building my business. And I'm like, well, why am I not at this? Why don't I have the right staff? Why don't I have, the right office? When am I gonna?
Right.
I mean, every day I wake up like I should just give up because I don't have
Ab-
I don't have the right, camera. Like,
Absolutely.
and you always feel like you lacking something, But the hardest thing I've been learning with being a business owner is being patient with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, thank you. That resonated with me. And I never, honestly, studied the Bible, read the Bible, read that scripture 100 times, but never really applied it to myself.
That's something I always think about. I'm like, patience. What is patience? Because I know I've been anxious
Yeah,
a lot of times,
me too. I'm
and I
example.
screwed a lot of things up, not waiting for God to
Yes.
do His work. When you're impatient, that tells me that there's something about you that you're not liking.
Ooh,
Don't be so harsh on yourself, critical of yourself if you're not where you think you should be.
Yeah. And what, you know what? I always say, you hear me say, I get angry first.
Yeah.
I be honest and I don't care who hears it. Like all the time I've been in the church, I wish we would focus on that
Yeah.
instead of focusing on love is kind, love is patient, with everybody else and all the people we want to evangelize. Let's start with love is kind, love is patient. It holds no record of wrongs. Let's not hold record of wrongs with ourselves. And I
Absolutely.
have a long list, even on the way, to this podcast recording. It's like, you're a failure. Why are you doing this? You didn't really a podcast host. Go home and go to sleep.
Right.
I mean, I got at least 50,000 voices and sound, comments, holding records of all the times I failed, all the times I messed up, why people don't want to look at me, why I don't want to look at myself. I could be here forever just talking about all the things that run through my head. And I think, it's really important people see me because they like, oh, I'm a doc. I have so many titles now, it's ridiculous. But you're thinking I'm a doctor, I'm a professor. She got it all together. No, not Dr.
Right.
Thea like that. I am constantly fighting with that, and it stops me from being the best version of myself that God wants me to be. And God said it clearly. It's the scripture has been there forever, right?
That's right.
But I literally, until you mentioned that, didn't think, oh, I could just apply that to myself. But it
Absolutely.
always felt, because we're coming from this premise of deny yourself, it always feels like those scriptures are for other people. It's not for me.
Absolutely. And that brings me to why I think there was a question that you have for me,
Oh,
or
yeah,
why
I
I don't
forgot.
get in front of the camera.
I just disciple myself.
You-
I don't worry about you.
There was a question that you was going to ask me that
Yes,
why I
ask
did
her.
not, why I don't get
Don't you get in front of the camera? I mean,
that
you should have your own podcast.
because
Why don't you have your own podcast?
because of what we just talked about, self-love. The lack of self-love
Wow.
is why I haven't gotten in front of the camera before.
Wow. Well,
You understand what I'm saying?
I hear you loud and clear. I just
And
wanted to make space for that because it's such a lie. Because you're killing it right now. I just want to give you both mics.
but here's the thing about that self-love,
Yes.
and these when you grow up in an environment that teaches you to hate yourself, even whether and sometimes parents, where we come from,
Yes.
everyone is fighting to stay alive,
True.
and in that, people unintentionally uh disregard others. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
They hurt each other.
Oh yeah.
I mean, like
Yes.
our community is famous for coining slick phrases, to make themselves feel good, to elevate themselves. Coins, words and phrases, and like there's a phrase that we always talk about. When they talk about people in the hood, crabs of a barrel.
Yeah.
We always refer to Black people in the community as crabs in the barrel, and it's always applied to the idea that there's another person who don't want to see you advance.
Right.
So what they do, they sabotage your success. But that's not always true. A crab is every crab in that pot
Mm.
are faced with the same detriment.
Right.
Their
Yeah.
their death is upon them.
Right. They have the same destiny.
And each of them are fighting to get out that pot. So a lot of times when you look at a lot of black people who are getting out of that pot, and people are like those crabs, they are attaching themselves to them unintentionally and unwillingly. They don't even realize that their attachment is going to cause both of them to fail.
To die.
So everybody in the hood is not trying to sabotage you.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're just trying to fight and find a way out too.
They're trying to survive.
And in the process, they just everyone just fumbled the bag.
Yes. Hot.
That's what happens in the community. So we hurt each other.
Yes.
And we grew up in these environments that create people like me.
Yeah. And me.
And you and so many other people who here you are 50 years old and you still dealing with issues that you experienced as a child.
Right. So yeah.
You still can't get one of the blessings that I've had bestowed upon me was meeting the people that I've met out here. I met some great men out here.
That's so
and
amen.
I wasn't aware of personal development and growth, mindset growth, and all that stuff, right? I went through so many grief recovery counseling courses.
Yeah, I mean,
So that's why it's okay for me to be vulnerable. I'm okay with being vulnerable and allowing people to see that side of me because I'm now comfortable with this.
Yes.
I'm now able, or I'm now comfortable getting in front of the camera and allowing people to see that I'm not perfect.
That's right. So thank you. Yes.
Because
I
it's
appreciate that.
the same way that Dr. EP said in the previous episode, it's not about you.
Right.
When you understand that your work is about everyone else, that means that sometimes you got to be vulnerable.
Yes.
To make the impact that God wants you to make.
Wow. Thank you. Wow. I mean, thank you. Thank you and thank you. I definitely come from humble beginnings.
Right.
I grew up in the inner cities of East Orange and Newark. And my dad and my mom were on drugs since I knew them, right? But my point is, it's so easy, and this is where we started when we started this podcast, because I'm buttoned up, right? I look professional. I got, I've learned to assimilate into this world, to survive. Some of what you see, even the button up part, is just me surviving. I had to hold down a job. I had to be in corporate America with being the only Black woman. I didn't have any space to be vulnerable, nor to look weak. And so this is the flip side of what you're sharing is ever since a little girl, my first memory from grief recovery, when I was 2 years old, I was the person who stopped my father, who was in full police uniform, from shooting my mother in the head.
Right.
And so these are and so most of my childhood was I was the parent to two drug addicts who was, no, daddy, don't shoot mommy. No, daddy, don't climb through the window. No, daddy, don't sick your dog on people. No, mommy, don't do it. Like I'm the one. So this, even though I'm vulnerable, I'm still a product of my environment. That's why I'm sometimes I can be very rigid because I am the hyper responsible parent to myself. And so a lot of times people are like, what's going on with her? Because it's still trauma though. Because I wasn't able, I remember when I first started my recovery programs, it was so crazy because the people, and again, I was the only Black one in the room because we need to be in recovery. We need to run. And I encourage that as an HR person. I always share with my employees that I was in recovery. They don't even, they're like, she's telling me this? Yes, I'm telling you, I was in recovery. But one of the first things they said was, what do you like to do for fun? That just made me mad. I'm like, I don't have time for fun. Do I look like I had time for fun? What are you talking about?
Exactly what you're talking about.
And I'm like, took me maybe 6 months to come up with something fun. I had to literally sit outside and say, okay, what can I do for fun?
Mhm.
Okay, I could put my foot in the pool. Okay, I could do that. I think I could put one foot in the pool. Okay, but then the whole time I'm thinking I got to go to work. So that's part of my trauma is I gotta work. I gotta hustle. I don't have time to have fun. I don't have time to be laughing and joking about the business because I gotta take care of myself. So people, that's the flip side of it, where I'm hyper um, driven and a workaholic. And so that's another reason I don't like being in front because sometimes I could be overly intense. I feel like I'm intense. I'm like these people. I'm scaring people, but I don't think that's how I see myself again. But I don't. Obviously, people watching this podcast, they obviously don't see me that way. So anyhow, I feel like I'm in therapy. I'm gonna be quiet now. Oh, get therapy. By the way, therapy works, and
And the reason why that's so important because
yes,
that affect how you show up
yes,
everywhere you go, which brings us to
showing up.
go back to the very first episode when the Diddy dilemma when I asked you
I was like, no.
to do an episode on P Diddy and it's not
Yes.
because I wanted to exploit the situation,
Yeah.
but there were some things that people can learn
Yes.
from that.
I was.
And what you said was always bring your best self to work.
I
Can you
think.
elaborate on that?
Yes. So, and HR,
And it doesn't necessarily have to be work. Just wherever you go, bring your best self.
you know, one scripture, and y'all can put it in the comments what the scripture is right now, but one of the things that helped me through really difficult times and at work and life is do everything as if doing it for the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Because honestly, I come from a background where I do everything as if doing it for myself. How can I get over? How can I be in front? How whatever. It's like it's always was about how can I survive? I didn't care about being excellent. And that's why I was saying one of the things that's one of my weaknesses that I've learned over the years is I'll do things with some band-aids, some glue, some duct tape and call it a day. It looks good to everybody else, but I know it wasn't my best. I know it wasn't excellent. And so some of the things that I teach in human resources is yes, bring your best self to work.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is sometimes that could be a little stressful because we're not always our best. We're not always at my husband teases me because um when I was 10 years old, I would get grades like an A minus and I
Mm-hmm.
always change it to a plus. That was just you can ask my mother. That's what I did. She never would check. So if I had a D, I'd take the D and put another D on top and make it a B. If it was a C, I fix that letter, make
That make,
that C a B or A. It was
okay.
never under a B, okay?
Okay.
I was like, it's the teacher fault. I don't know what they talking about. I'm changing that grade. And so all the way up to high school, even my report cards, if they gave me a C, I changed it. And I'm like, I don't know what was wrong with that computer, but I got a B in this class.
Okay.
But anyhow, what was my point? My point is that part of that caused me like not to grow in some areas because I couldn't learn. I wasn't embracing my weaknesses. Does
Mm-hmm.
that make sense? And so I just wanted to say, I say show up, be your best at work, but then there's a place where you should also be able to be vulnerable at work
Absolutely.
but this, trust me, it's not that safe to be vulnerable at work. But we got to get to a place, we talk about DE and I, we talk about belonging, we talk about justice. That part of what we struggle with, and I'm just gonna go on. I gotta finish this thought. As a black woman, a lot of times, and men, but mostly black women, because they fire the black men faster than they fire black women. But um, a lot of times we're not succeeding in the workplace because nobody knows who we are. We're in here like faking it till we make it. We're
Right.
covering, we're not being vulnerable. And they're like, she got an attitude. What's wrong? No, we're just scared. We're just in here like, mind my business, keep my head down, staying in my lane. But when you
So
mind in your
playing small.
playing small
Yeah.
and invisible, but that's what's stopping us from also being at the same time. It hurts us because and this is what I hear in the boardrooms of CEOs and the C-suite people. They're like, well, I don't really know Octavius. Does he talk?
Mhm.
I was like, I don't know her. I mean, who? Oh, you mean the black girl over that sits over? I never heard her say a word. Yeah, because we come in, our parents say, don't trust them, be quiet, go in there, do your job. But now they're looking for you to shine. You're not even shining. You're just playing, like you said, playing small. And I figured that out. I was like, black people, we need to speak up at work. We need to take risk at work. We need to be vulnerable at work, which is totally opposite from what our parents and their parents taught them. And it all is like it's like a vicious cycle. So I hope that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense, but some people believe
Mhm.
that if you play, I mean, if you show up,
Mhm.
then that can be threatening to other people.
It will be, and it can be. And here's the thing, and it's another thing I've been observing. We have to learn how to show up without, there's no need for us to be threatening. Um, we have to learn how to show up without all the emotions and the feelings, and also be able to just show up. Just show up. Maybe you do need therapy. Maybe you are showing up with your triggers and your trauma. Yeah, that's gonna scare people. You showing up, don't talk to me. You acted out at work yelling because somebody said something to you, asked you to pass the copy paper. Yeah, people gonna be afraid of you.
Absolutely, but
So you do have to learn how to manage that
mhm,
and learn how to, respectfully express yourself at work. I think that's where we as a people, especially my people, black people, um, I think that's where we just need to do some work. I'm not saying be stiff and not be yourself or not be vulnerable, but there's a way, and this is biblical. We can't always be led by our feelings,
right,
but we can't always be conflict avoiders either. We have to say what we need to say. And in my experience, I promise you, those are the people I see get promoted. Those are the people, when you see black people, you're like, how'd she get up there? She's a C suite. That's how I got promoted because I learned how to kind of manage how I said what I needed to say, but the way I said it,
right.
it was influential. It wasn't like, and I don't do it right all the time. Trust me. I just got called on the carpet last week. Someone thought I was being hostile in the work. They thought I was being aggressive or hostile. If you're listening, you know who you are. And we had to have it out. I was like, that wasn't my intention. And to that person, he felt like, well, you were just trying to outshine me, or you were, disrespectful. You were, the person said I was disrespecting their authority
Right.
because I wasn't in my place. So it's a real slippery slope. It's like 1 minute you got to stand up, but as black women, black men, as people in general, they're like, now go back over there in your place. They're like, okay, well, where am I? So it's an art.
Absolutely. I
Thank
now
you. You got me all hyper. You
I'm
see how
not
he
a
did it?
biblical scholar or anything like that,
Yeah,
but that
okay.
makes me think of the scripture, be fruitful and multiply.
Oh, okay.
Right?
That's a good
That
one.
could be applied to that. You know, because if
That's
you're
interesting.
if you're all it's a if you're saying
Mhm.
always bring your
Yeah.
best self to work,
I
that
like
means to
that.
be fruitful.
I would have never thought of it that way, but I would have to agree.
To be fruitful. To
Yeah.
always and work doesn't necessarily mean a job.
Yeah.
Work means anywhere you go,
Yeah.
any space you go into that you're infecting other people.
I'm shaking my head because you are dropping some knowledge over here because I never thought about it that way. But if you show up in excellence, you are going to be fruitful. When I was, promoted to whatever role that I won't mention, as soon as I showed up in excellence, I was able to convince the CEO to expand my department.
Hmm.
And then I was able to hire 4 people from all over the world. I had one person from Australia, one person in San Diego. And so to this day, that division is still there.
Right.
I'm not there, but that department, that initiative is still there. And also in terms of entrepreneurship, if you show up, the way we just described, you will be fruitful and multiply. Oh, wait a minute.
Just think about
I
how
had a
many
moment.
things
Okay, go
that
ahead.
can just think about how many things that can be multiplied
Yes.
if you go into spaces and be fruitful.
I never thought.
Income,
Yes, income.
relationships,
That's right. You dropped.
relationships that leads to resources
Yes. Oh my
because
goodness.
everything you want is connected to somebody.
Yeah, now you can employ other people.
Absolutely.
And now you can, because again, if your cup's not full, if your oxygen mask is not on,
Hmm.
how in the world are you going to help somebody else? So because I am trying to show up and be excellent and be vulnerable. And trust me, sometimes I have my people, y'all know who y'all are. I want to snap on them so bad. I'm
Mm.
like, they're not doing what I want them to do exactly. But the reality is, I'm able, there's, people on my team that the work I do feeds their whole family, period.
Right.
And to be able to be in a level where God could bless me, and everyone on my team are people of color, no apologies whatsoever. But so we can be people of color who can hire other people of color and make sure people of color have homes and multiple homes and cars and whatever, feed their children, go to private school. That all is that be fruitful and multiply. That was brilliant. I love that. Oh my goodness. See, why aren't you need to have your own podcast?
Uh,
What's the
I'm
name of
working
your
on it.
podcast? What's it going?
I'm still working on it. I'm still working on it. But I I have this thing about procrastinate. I do procrastinate a lot. Again, that goes back to like self hatred. There's some things that I like. Like I did my first episode of my podcast 2.5 years ago,
Okay.
right?
Okay. Okay.
And I played it back,
All right.
and I was so critical of that recording. I didn't sound right. I wasn't articulate. I stuttered through it, but I got through it.
I know you're not stuttering now.
Right. But and here it is, 2.5 years later. I haven't done episode 2 yet.
The best way to move forward is just to go. Do it afraid. Yeah, that's the expression. Be afraid and do it anyway.
Right.
And I think that's my superpower.
Right.
Because of my upbringing, because I grew up in a house of pure dysfunction. And I was left alone a lot. I'm little, I'm 2, I'm 3, in a house, scared to death. I was hearing sounds. I thought there was ghosts in my house. I used to grow up. I was scared because my parents would leave me alone, and I'm the only child. So I grew up alone and hearing stuff and scared people.
Right.
Just all, I was not protected, right? So my point is, I learned how to do things afraid. I think in general I was afraid all the time, so I had to do things. I had a choice. I either did nothing or did everything, right? And so I think as it's a muscle,
Right.
and the more you just do it afraid, stuttering. I stutter too. I don't know if you ever noticed. Sometimes I stutter. I be stuttering. I be like, what the heck? I be saying things, and then even when I watch the podcast, watch it back, I'm like, I'm slurring my all. What the heck am I saying? Whatever. I just be like, whatever. I don't care.
No, but
I
that's something that we have to
correct.
talk about, because you know why? Because I have to edit that.
See, I know. See, you should have told me.
Yeah. I'm like, oh my God.
So you
come on,
notice I
Thielen.
was slurring?
I said, come on, Thelá.
Because I'm from the hood. I have a lazy tongue also.
That's okay. That's okay.
I don't always speak with proper diction.
But I say that to say that that's in the past, though. That self hatred thing is in the past.
That's good.
You know what I'm saying?
But not the slurring, because I'll probably still slur words.
Okay. I mean, that's fine.
I'm just kidding.
But I'm talking about with
it's-
me too. I'm talking about that self hatred thing is in the past.
Well,
I
it
don't
comes
I
and
don't deal with that.
goes.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
It'll come. I mean, what it is, it comes in like waves.
Yeah.
And every now and then you think you're over something, and then it just come by and visit you one day. It just comes by.
I'm still here. I'm still here. What's up? What's up?
And then you just have to. But what I learned is it gets quieter.
Yeah.
It gets before it's so loud, it's paralyzing.
Yeah.
It's like, what is that loud noise? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I hear this little tiny whisper. Shh, go away. That's how it is for me now. Because I would have been appalled that I was slurring words, because I'm trying really hard to pronounce my words properly. And but you know what? I think people understood what I was saying. So
Let's
sir.
revisit another
Okay.
episode.
See, he keeps me on track. Notice.
I
this.
want to talk about the episode that you did with Levada.
Oh, that's my girl,
Levada
Levada.
English. I mean, she
Yes.
brought it.
She just said, "What you want?" I'm just gonna bring it right here.
She definitely brought it. And there was something that
knows
she
her
that
stuff.
she
knows her stuff.
there was something that she said, and I want you to hear it. And tell me what you think about it.
What people often try to make us forget is that any great movement in this country has been led by Black women, and I'm pretty sure around the world great movements have led. So they know how smart we are.
Yes.
That's why they gave you all of those tasks and duties. They just want to take credit for your work.
But when she said that, I'm like, oh, really? Okay. I didn't know, like, I really didn't know much about Black history in that sense. You know, like all the Black women. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I had to do some research.
Okay, what you learn?
And I had to do some research, and I had to make sure that she knew what she was talking about.
I'm a good.
And like
Yeah.
all these movements that she's talking about. When I think about all the movements, the first one was the abolition movement.
Yes.
Truth.
Sojourner
Sojourner Truth.
Truth.
Ain't I's a woman?
Oh, okay. Break it down for Black History Month now.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And then Harriet Tubman.
There you go. Do we need more people? I mean, goodness, that was a lot right there. Those two.
Then the civil rights movement. Black
Okay.
women,
Yeah.
they led.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was the women rights movement, the Black Power movement. And this is when I added
Okay.
the Black family movement.
Oh, all right.
Because, now people can make an argument and say, well, Black women were incentivized to keep Black men out of the house, by offering them all those social services, right? So, but even if that was the case,
Argument is that I never heard.
I hear it. I mean, there are
said that.
believe it or not, and this is why I'm bringing this. And I know this is going into something. This is not what, but we're talking about things in those podcasts that resonated with us.
Yeah, that's
and it made me think about, okay, Black women were instrumental in where we are today. All the rights that we have today, Black women were there. That's right. And they led a lot of those movements. But if you look at social media today, on all these platforms with all these male platforms, everybody are bashing Black women.
Yep.
And it makes me say, Negroes.
Yeah.
If anybody failed the Black family, it was Black men.
Sorry. Trauma. Y'all have so much trauma. I don't know. I'm surprised y'all still here and not extinct.
Because, and the reason why I say the Black family, that was the Black family movie, because even with having the man taken out of the home, with all the trauma that she had to endure, she still fought to keep the family that was left intact.
That's right.
Think about all the things that Black women do. Think about all the things Black women do for family.
Everything.
They put their house up for bail. I mean, when their sons go to jail and they got the bail their sons out, they put their house up for collateral.
We put our whole body up if we had to.
All the sacrifices. So I think about things like that.
Yeah.
Yes, are they perfect? No.
Who? Black women?
Black women, no.
I think we are, actually. No.
But
very close to perfect.
But they can call me a simp or all they want. But I'm going to say it again.
No, we're not doing that.
We both contribute to the condition that we are in right now. But go ahead. You got to say about anything I say.
You said everything that needed to be said. I've worked in equity and all diversity and all that DEI, and the reality is I am a Black woman.
Okay.
And I talk about it in my book that is I'm angry all the time. I think about my grandmother. I could be so emotional. I remember my father's. I have two grandmothers who raised me basically, and my father's mother. All she wanted was a couch from Ira Rose, this store called Ira Rose. That's all she talked about. She talked about eat your food, and I can't wait till one day I have a couch from Ira Rose. That's what she said every day, and I just think about all she wanted was a couch. And she died. She never got that couch, and but in the meantime, she took care of her house. She raised a whole family in an apartment the size of this studio. I still have dreams about that. Where were they sleeping? I don't even know where. I have two closets of clothes. They had, how we have our coat closet? all the family stuff was in that one closet. How was she managing a house that small? So anyhow, I digress. And then I had my other grandmother, my mother's mother. She worked sun up to sundown. She worked one job at a hospital, and then her and her husband owned the cleaning service. But you're right. In my family, I'm one of those families where the dad wasn't in the home. In most of our lives, like my dad was not in the home. And I would see my father like once a year, seriously. And um, my mother, even in all of her problems, she held it down. She
Right.
held it down. She did what she had to do. And my grandmothers held it down. All the women in my family held it down.
Same here. You know, I grew up in a household where my grandmother, who had a third grade education, she migrated from North Carolina to Baltimore. She raised 5 daughters and 5 sons with,
See,
with a third
we
grade
could just
education.
pause right there. What would we be doing if we had 5 daughters and 5 sons?
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. I barely made it through my 3 that I have.
So-
That is a miracle.
Yeah, absolutely. So
That's-
think about it.
During Jim Crow,
All
coming
that.
out of Jim Crow, coming out of segregation.
And she owned a home.
Yeah.
And I remember all of the women in the house worked. They had jobs.
Well, that's how she probably did it. Yeah, that's
But-
helpful. Yeah.
But here's the thing. But I remember on the flip side, that wasn't the case for all of the men in the household. See, my grandmother was old school. She
Yeah.
protected her boys and made her women work. And that's the household I grew up in.
Yeah. It was similar in my family too. The boys didn't really have to do anything, and the women were expected to work and clean and do everything. And but I think honestly, I think that's a part of why we do see this breakdown in the black family is because of a lot of our black men never really learned responsibility. Some of them. I'm not gonna say all because I'm so grateful to be a member of a sorority where I get to hear stories because I've never experienced it of people who come from, this one woman we met today. Her dad was a Pullman, a Pullman porter
Right.
on the train. And his father was a Pullman porter, and right. And so I'm like, what would that be like to have a working dad in the house? To have someone you could say, oh, my dad worked for the phone company for 50 years, and he would come home. And I hear stories. It wasn't real for me, but these men, there were black men who were, making it work. Like Dr. Linda, not to tell all her business, but she always talks about how her dad I think he had 7 girls and put them all through college. And he was like working at, blue collar job. And they all went to college on blue collar, minimum wage.
Absolutely. I mean,
So I don't even understand. But honestly, I can't wrap my head around it. But I do agree with what Levada said about, all movements. We all, as black women, I mean, if you think about it, well, we won't even talk about Africa because we could be here all day. You know how we, as African women, how we are, the center of those communities in
Right.
Africa. Okay, so we just put a pin in that.
put a pin in that. Yeah.
Then they bring us here from Africa. We know who we are, and we continue that legacy of protection and protecting the family and taking care of the village, right? Because that's what we did in Africa. Now, a lot of times we didn't know why we were doing it because it was so watered down after a while. But that's who we are innately. That's who we are as black women. We're
Right.
protectors. We're like, I always imagine we're the lionesses, right? And the black men, if we were in Africa, the black men are the lion, and we're the lionesses. We take care of the herd, and we go get the food. And you know what I'm saying? We're the hunters.
Right.
We are the hunters and the gatherers and the protectors too. And the men, y'all just get like look buff and scare people away.
Just real quick for the audience, what is your take on everything that is going on right now with all the dismantling, of DEI programs? And I mean, can you help these people? Help these
I don't
people
know if I can
understand
help them.
what DEI is, who is affected,
Wow.
who benefited most, who
Wow. You
that's
really trying to get me to lose all of the audience. No, I'm just kidding. So no, DEI is, more than an ideal. It's really a fact that D is for diversity, E is for equity, I is for inclusion. So what we're seeing now under this new president and new administration is they're trying to demonize DEI. It's totally misinformation of what DEI is about. DEI is mostly, I love the fact that it's being brought to the forefront because now the truth is being brought to the forefront, right? Because when it was kind of just, oh, that DEI thing, no one was really paying attention. They're just listening to what is on, the little 10-second soundbite. But now DEI, diversity is the diversity of people, but equity, which means you're just trying to make sure that people have a fair chance, period. Equity is fairness. I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. And what's important to know about that is because of movements like the civil rights movement and laws like Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, some of the people who benefited the most were white women, were uh, the gay and queer community, uh, people who needed disabled people or people who needed special access.
right.
So I've been saying lately with this DEI, I've been called more than ever to do more DEI work. I'm getting people calling me like every week asking, for quotes for me to do training, and they're interested in DEI. They want to know more about how can they still practice equity in their organization. So I think the number one thing I want to say is DEI is not illegal. DEI exists. It will never, ever, 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 ever go away. It's like saying freedom will go away. Just because, oh, this month freedom is no longer free. You can't be free. No, we're going to fight for our freedom. We're going to fight for equity. You're always going to fight for equity. Let someone take your equity away. You're going to fight for it. It's not going away. You can't tell an employee, oh, we're not going to be equity. You don't have any equity today. New president's here. All your equity is gone.
Right.
No, now we see what's happening. You have the union suing. You have lawsuits. You have part of DEI for me when I was really, in the trenches was preventing lawsuits.
Right.
And so the DEI practitioner, the DEI leader was doing the organization a favor, keeping them out of different discrimination, harassment lawsuits. The whole last thing I'll say is civil rights movement and equity. It all came, a lot of it's, truthfully, it started way back in the 1700s, but it all came to like a culmination in 1964 with Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And that's where you see Lyndon Johnson signing the Title VII Act, and Martin Luther King's looking down over his shoulder. It's a famous picture.
Okay.
That's what everything that's what we need to also be looking for is for this new administration trying to roll back anything that's under that Title VII law and other laws like ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. Then, one thing I'll say that I've been thinking about, we currently have leaders in space right now who are DEI hires.
Right.
Yeah. So we have a president who is 78 years old and possibly disabled. And we have his consultant who's on the spectrum. Okay.
What?
So Elon Musk is on the spectrum.
Oh, you told
he
Elon Musk.
falls under, if he was in the workplace, he would be a DEI hire. Okay.
Their billions of dollars are speaking for them.
I guess so. Okay, even with billions of dollars, they wouldn't get hired at a regular company.
Right.
And their demographic. Their demographic puts them in the same category as the DEI. Gotcha. What they're calling DEI. So DEI is more than just race and gender. It goes into socioeconomic status, whether it's rich or poor, and it goes into diverse abilities, neurodiversity, which Elon Musk is. He's on the spectrum, And my favorite thing lately to remind people, he's also African American. Elon Musk.
He's African
He is
American.
African American. He was
It's
born in South
right. I get
Africa
that.
and he lives in
It's
America.
very hard to it's very hard to accept that. You know what I'm saying?
It's a
Yeah,
fact.
yeah. It's fact. It's
But
fact.
here's the thing.
He is
If
considered
he
African American.
was coming from, well, he moved to Canada after he came from South Africa. But think about it. If he was trying to be hired at a regular organization and he was South African, he would be considered a DEI.
I get it. I get it.
So it makes
So
absolutely no sense, but it's
it doesn't.
great because now we get to talk about it and we get to challenge these backwards beliefs. I would say, as a human resources person for over 25 years, I have never had to hire somebody for their race. Like, oh, let's just put Octavius in here because he's black. It does not work like that. That's illegal.
Right.
So that is illegal to say, oh, let's just bring Susie here because she's, black.
So why, whenever it's presented to the public, it always seems like it's associated with black people. When the statistics shows, there was a video that someone went onto the labor website and it gave a list of the 8 groups of people who benefited from DEI. Right.
Right.
Black people was number 8. It had white women,
Yeah.
Hispanics number 2.
Yeah.
I think number 3 was Asian.
It makes sense.
After that was LGBT. After that it was handicapped people. After that it was veterans.
Then
And then at the very bottom it was it was black people. So if we are the very last people to benefit, why are they always pushing it as if black people is
yeah.
it's the issue?
Because it's a part of a larger agenda to go back to what they believe made America great again, where people, again, we were talking earlier, were in their place. Everyone knew their place. We were in a subservient place. I dealt with that a lot in corporate America.
Mhm.
And some of the times when I had to file complaints against people, it was typically because they wanted me to be in a subservient role. If I ever voiced my opinion, like I'm talking to you now,
Mhm.
seriously looking in your
Yeah.
eye, I was intimidating. And they were, and they call it the pet the threat syndrome. So
Right.
as long as I'm a pet and I know my place, I'm fine. And so there's this unfortunately racist view in the world that we need to just stay in our place. And this DEI is what they're trying to make the new N words. Anything that bad can happen, instead of saying those Negroes did it, now they could just say, replace that, the DEI people did it.
Yeah, but even when there wasn't a black person even anywhere in
No matter. Because they know that people are not going to do their research. They're
Right.
just going to feel good to blame the DEI, and in their mind. And even when he was saying that, he was talking about disabled people. He was talking about a program that had been rolled out to hire more, just by Biden and Obama, to hire
Right.
more disabled people. But that is to have this image intentionally that when things go wrong, it's a black person. Because DEI equals black people. So, Octavius Johnson, he told us about a lot of different things today. I'm still full from everything he emptied out, so I'm very full. And I want you to tune in again. This was the first season, so tune in, watch what's coming next on the second season of Ask Mrs. HR. Like, share, subscribe, and comment. But right now I need you to subscribe, so do that right now. Subscribe. And if you want to be a guest on the show, reach out to me in the comments after you subscribe. And have a wonderful, wonderful time, life, and ask Mrs. HR.